Welcome, viewers. Welcome to Steve and Dave's 50 Years Ago This Month. This is a series that takes a look at the Billboard 100 charts from the 1970s, or now 1971.
71, yeah.
This is going to be our first episode from 1971, January, Steve, 13th? 12th?
Yeah, 16th, January 16th, right in the middle of the month.
January 16th.
Yeah.
January 16th, 1971. We're going to talk a little bit about the hits, top 10, some selections from the top 40. And we're also going to provide a playlist. And that's a vital part of this, because we want you to be able to follow along and actually watch and listen to the songs that we're talking about.
That's right.
So we strongly encourage you to make use of that. In addition, we'll have a list of sources and readings for you below as well.
Below, yeah. Well, so with that, we should jump into it. And in mid-January 1971, George Harrison's "My Sweet Lord, Isn't It a Pity" is still on top of the charts. Of course, this song comes from the album, which I've just spaced out.
All Things Must Pass.
All Things Must Pass, the gigantic.
This is funny, people, because you have to know Steve is one of a great George Harrison fan, and one of the few people who really thinks All Things Must Pass was dynamite.
Yeah, I do. I think it's actually a very good album. It's probably not 3 albums worth, but I think it's one of the best albums. I think it's arguably the best Beatles solo album. I'll put my, if not the best, there you go.
Oh,
there
okay.
You go. I just think it's really sublime. But you have My Sweet Lord at number 1. We haven't had talked about this next group yet, but
we have.
Well,
well, they already had a hit last year, or in 1970 rather, with Candida.
Oh, you're right. That's right. Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right. At number 2, it's Dawn with "Knock Three Times."
Knock Three Times, their second hit.
That's right. It
was even bigger than Candida. This actually peaked at number 1. In England as well, and it peaked at number 2 of the adult contemporary, the easy listening chart. Very, very listenable. It's one of my favorite Dawn songs. It's not their best seller, but it's I think everybody that liked Tony Orlando and Dawn certainly loves this song.
Well, I would agree. There is something eminently likable about Tony Orlando and Dawn. I think that there is something that is, I don't know exactly. They had, whatever it is, they had it. Real rapport within the group. They were, frankly, they were kind of easy on the eyes. They were attractive young people. And they had a sound that was, well, while not really earth-shaking, was catchy. And there was a certain kind of craftsmanship with their records. And Tony Orlando had a fairly lengthy career by this point in the record business. He knew
incredible. Yes,
yeah.
And that's something that I was not aware of before, but it really is incredible. I had no idea. By the way, the video that we have on the playlist is a rare Tony Orlando without his mustache.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. Famous mustaches in Hollywood or in the 70s, yeah. Attractive.
Okay, this was written by L. Russell Brown and Erwin Levine, and that's a songwriting team that was also responsible for "Tie a Yellow Ribbon," the Dawn hit, and for "I Woke Up in Love This Morning."
Oh goodness!
So there's that. Their idea with this, they were kind of inspired by Up on the Roof, the old Drifters song by Gibb and King. They kind of wanted to have that urban tenement sort of idea. So loving the tenements, right? The song Knock 3 Times was along with Candida was one of the two Dawn hits before it was Tony Orlando and Dawn. And Dawn was Tony Wine and Linda November. They were the singers on this.
Okay.
And that changed after Knock 3 Times. But Tony Wine was one of the songwriters at the Brill Building, where Tony Orlando actually got his start as a songwriter. He had been discovered by Don Kirshner after he formed his first music group at 15, called it's a doo-wop group called the Five Gents.
The Five Gents. Oh, that's
59. The Five Gents. And they cut some demos and attracted the attention of Don Kirshner. And so that was kind of his introduction into the business. So right away, he was already working with some of the biggest producer or the biggest producer and at the Brill Building, which was, a huge center for talent.
It was huge. It's legendary center of talent. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess LA might have been sort of, the hearth of pop music. But if you weren't in LA, if you were in the Brill Building in New York City, I mean, it didn't get, that was pop music that for decades, frankly. Oh, it's super, important.
But he wasn't only doing this. He was he's writing. He had his first 2 top 40 hits at 16 in 1961.
Amazing, yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. Halfway to Paradise, which was the title of his autobiography as well, and Bless You. Bless You, actually, they were both, like I said, top 40. Bless You made it to number 15. Incredible success for, just a kid out of nowhere.
A kid, yeah.
In 1967, he was hired by Clive Davis at Columbia Records.
The legendary, the one and only.
The legendary Clive Davis to become the general manager of their publishing division, April Blackwood Music. And by the end of the decade, he had been promoted to vice president of Columbia CBS Music. Tony Orlando was vice president of Columbia CBS Music.
Okay,
before he had any of these.
All right, so which speaks to the need inside him to perform, right? Because if you're the VP, I mean, come on, you've made it.
You've made it. I mean, that you don't have to really do anything else except to hold on to that position for as long as you can. So anyway, he was already a huge success. He had already, by that point, he had already signed Barry Manilow to his first record deal with Bell Music. With
Bell Music, that's right. Yeah.
Had co-written and produced the first few tracks that Manilow did. But here's the thing: when these songs, the first song Candida, he did kind of as a favor to the producer. Just needed a singer. He said, "Can you do this for me?" Yeah. And he said, "Well, let's just keep it on the slide." It's kind of moonlighting, right? And the question of conflict of interests is another thing. And if he publicly bombed, it also wouldn't do much for his image, record executive. So let's just call this. We'll say that this was done by Dawn, and Dawn was actually the middle name of Bell Records managers, the executive, Steve Wax, was
Okay.
the name of his daughter.
Oh my goodness.
Dawn.
Okay, so the Dawn name Dawn is like as much of a placeholder as anything. It's like, okay, let's call
It
it.
is. It's just a placeholder. And when he heard "Knock 3 Times," he heard another artist doing this, and he thought, man, that could really be a hit if it was produced right. It's got so many, possibilities.
Yeah.
So he took it, he produced the hell out of it, but still the same thing. Questions of fidelity and conflicts of interest and so on.
Yeah, sure.
So he just said, all right, well, we'll use Dawn for this as well. And as I said, Linda November and Tony Wine sang on both of those. Tony Wine actually wrote Candida. So
once again, I mean, yeah.
Then they wanted to take it on tour because they were both hits.
Sure.
But they discovered that Dawn was the name of 6 other groups that were out on tour at that time.
Oh, perfect.
So that's when they became Dawn with Tony Orlando, and then of course later Tony Orlando and Dawn.
Well, that's how that.
And then just a couple of years later, 74, they went on TV, did a variety series. That went on for 4 seasons. Was also extremely popular. Of course, the 1970s were the decade for variety shows.
For sure, that's right. Yeah.
Tony Orlando and Dawn show was actually the summer replacement for Sonny and Cher.
Yeah, I remember. Yes, that's right.
At CBS.
And it almost an identical show. I mean, just in terms of format and
format, yeah,
exactly. There we go. Yeah.
And again, it's about likable people, very photogenic, of course, and
absolutely
they have a history, and so that rapport and that give and take was all came across very well. Did well with the TV audiences. And Tony Orlando's just been going since then. He had a short breakdown in 1977. His sister died. His best friend's Freddie Prinze.
Yeah.
Committed suicide.
Terrible moment.
Tony Orlando was actually on an episode of Chico and the Man.
Okay.
And so he just kind of had a breakdown, but then popped back up on his feet. Was addicted to cocaine for a while. I'm sure that had something to do with it. But he's been going strong ever since. From the 80s, he was kind of a staple in Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
1993, he bought his own Tony Orlando's Yellow Ribbon Music Theater in
Branson, Missouri.
Where else? Branson.
Yeah.
Right. So did that for 20 years before selling that, and then and he's been on and off at Las Vegas since then. Just an incredible. He's played for 5 presidents. Performed for 5 presidents. So a powerhouse. I had no idea.
Yeah, powerhouse. The Tony Orlando Dawn thing had it resonated. I think to some degree, if this is Tony Orlando's political views, it resonated with conservative groups of political leaders, and that tie a yellow ribbon, as we know, became a kind of anthem when the hostages in Iran returned in early 1981.
Right.
And they came to a sea of 1,000 ribbons across the United States. But a hugely successful individual, and a person who's lived 2, 3, 4 careers. I don't know. There's something really quite amazing about Orlando. I mean, honestly, a kind of American success story in a way. I mean,
absolutely. Yeah.
That phrase only in America, but there's something that rings true with Tony Orlando in that regard.
Do you know that his wife, his first wife, dated Buddy Holly?
Oh, jeez. No, I didn't know. I mean, but there you go. I mean, this is under the category of it's a small world, but this is
Well, yeah, of course, the pop music world anyway is incredibly small. But I just want to mention real quick, this was the last of the Dawn hits, and there would be a number of them. We're going to be talking about Orlando and Dawn all through.
absolutely, that's right.
But the group that actually became known as Dawn was then Thelma Hopkins and Joyce Vincent Wilson.
Yeah, and they were featured prominently in the TV show in particular.
Right, they were the TV show Dawn as well. So,
which was a real boost.
So
to
there's
both of their
that.
careers. Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks. Thanks for that. Again, we'll be talking more about Tony Orlando and Dawn in upcoming episodes. Mid-January, though, 1971, returning to the charts, we have at number 3, The Fifth Dimension's One Less Bell to Answer. Fifth Dimension, this Silky Smooth group from California, vocal group, whose songs were, in their own way, I think, kind of slyly sophisticated. They had a kind of sound, and they chose material that was sometimes a little challenging. And I think the One Less Bell to Answer sort of fits into that category. It's not a, strictly speaking, not as kind of straightforward pop song. There's something there that's almost kind of challenging. So
a Bacharach David number.
Yeah, that's right.
Like so many of the songs we're going to be have talked about and are going to be talking about through the 70s. That was the songwriter team of the late 60s and the 70s.
Yeah, without question.
And
okay, so then at number 4 you have Santana with Black Magic Woman, the remake of the Peter Green Fleetwood Mac tune, which in many ways is kind of became a kind of emblematic number for Santana, very much a number that the group was associated with, and I think we both agree is a more effective rendition of the song than the Fleetwood Mac.
I think so too. I think you talk about Black Magic Woman having a Latino flair to that somehow fits.
Yeah, and that then at number 5 we have the Partridge Family, of course, with I Think I Love You. This manufactured group and a kind of manufactured sound that nevertheless really caught fire in the early 1970s, and they sort of one hit after the next. Strangely enough, they successful in the pop charts.
Made a huge star of David Cassidy and led to his personal ruin.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it was the best thing and the worst thing that ever happened to David Cassidy.
Yeah.
And but you have then at number 5, I Think I Love You. Then at number 6 is really a fascinating group, a group that went through many, morphed in many ways. A group that had connections to England, had connections to Australia, and made it big in the United States. At number 6, you have the Bee Gees with Lonely Days.
Right, and that group had already gone through a number of incarnations, but it was still a few years away from the big incarnation where they discovered disco and kind of became the kings of that genre. But this is a few years before that. Lonely Days came from their 2 Years On album, and 2 Years On is probably a reference to the fact that the last album that they made, Odessa, had been made almost 2 years before Maurice left the group. There were conflicts arising out of the production of Odessa, and he had just had it, so he left.
Right.
Lonely Days was probably recorded like the day or the day after they got together and talked it out. And they basically said the reason for getting back together was that they were just so sick of having lawyers trying to divvy up their stuff. So rather than let that continue,
Right.
it's better just to get back together and make it a moot point. Barry was very very enthusiastic. He said, well, the Bee Gees are back together for now and forever. And he was right, you know.
Well, more or less he was right. Yeah, I think that,
Till death do us part, right?
Yeah,
So,
I mean, they're,
and of course, their most successful days still laid ahead of them at that point.
Sure.
But
Absolutely.
Lonely Days peaked at number 3. It this was written. Maurice said it was written in 10 minutes. Sat down at the piano, and in 10 minutes they had it.
That's so amazing.
Bee Gees. One of the 3 songs on the album that credits all 3 Bee Gees with writing it, and where they all 3 sing. Now, Lonely Days has an interesting tempo change.
Yes.
Very, it's basically 2 different songs in one. And a lot of people take a look and they say, well, you know, it's similar things that were going on in Abbey Road. And it was very successful. Barry Gibb tells the story. He said a few years back, their manager was in a restaurant, and this came on, Lonely Days. And he said, oh, that's my favorite Beatles song. Without any irony, he genuinely thought it was a Beatles song. This is the Bee Gees manager who's...
Well, I mean, that he needs to maybe be tuned in a little bit more. But I mean, but there is something about that sounds very kind of Abbey Road-ish. There was something in the air at this point. There is, in terms of the production and like you say, the tempo change. Look, it's an interesting song. I mean, it's a song that you pay attention to because of the different things that are happening within it. The hand claps, everything. It's actually a very interesting number, challenging number. Almost.
Yeah, I really like it. I think it's quite nice. It was released November 1970, although it was recorded, like I said, the day that they announced that they were getting back together is the official that they recorded it as well. That session also saw How Do You Mend a Broken Heart? So getting back together was obviously good for the group. And, saw some of their best material being made.
You know, it's the brothers Gibb. The dynamics within the brothers themselves, the 3 Gibb brothers in the Bee Gees, is interesting and complex. It's clear that Barry was the leader, and I think that was clear to everybody, including to Robin and Maurice. And I think that famously led to a lot of tension. It's also the case that these guys really had, they had deep affection for each other. So they fought like brothers, but their bond was profound. And that closeness comes through in their harmonies. It came through in their stage patter. There was something about the Bee Gees that you could just feel this kinship. It was just palpable that these guys were brothers. You could just, there was something about that was just really very, very real.
Yeah. Do you think Andy Gibb, the much younger brother, might have ever become a member of the Bee Gees, or did he just miss that boat by being so young?
Well, I think he missed the boat. Well, that's an interesting question. I think he missed that boat by being so young. But I also think that there's no reason, there's no reason to have not to consider the idea of Andy Gibb joining them later on. I mean, Andy Gibb died as a very young man. His career was very, very short. But
it was very short, very, very successful.
Very, very successful.
But very short.
And very much guided by his other brothers, particularly Barry. But there is something about the Gibb brothers that is, it almost defies explanation. They had a kind of chemistry that was just that only brothers could have. And of course, as you've already alluded to, their career hits another trajectory. It's stratospheric once the disco era comes forward. And the Bee Gees are on the crest of that wave, really through the entire disco era. But their output before disco is really, I think, quite satisfying. And you mentioned,
yeah, I love it. I love the early Bee Gees.
Yeah, and you mentioned Odessa, which is by sort of Bee Gee files considered sort of their lost classic album. People who are kind of nerdish when it comes to pop music oftentimes point to Odessa as being one of the most important albums ever made. You know, it didn't yield much, but I think the songwriting, the craftsmanship, the Bee Gees are they're a cut above. They're just a cut above. And
you know, it might be worthwhile for us at some point even to look at Barry Gibb in our Behind the Curtain.
I wouldn't disagree. Absolutely.
Series.
I mean, not to belabor this, but I think we've talked about people whose music will last into the future, and clearly the Beatles are part of that. But I think the Bee Gees are as well. I mean, I think songs, maybe even songs like Lonely Days these are songs that people will remember for a long time. And so at number 6 was Lonely Days. At number 7 is a regional artist, a guy by the name of King Floyd, and a regional hit that became a national hit, something called Groove Me. King Floyd comes out of the New Orleans scene. And one of the things that is we should never overlook is just how vibrant the music scene is in New Orleans, and how that music scene has always been vibrant. There is talent in New Orleans there's just talent everywhere. You go down any street in Bourbon Street, you're going to find talent. I mean, there's something about New Orleans that just vibrates. The music there is just part of the culture, and King Floyd was certainly part of this thriving music scene. That being said, I mean, he's like a lot of performers in this era. He had a couple of hits and a lot more misses, and he really only reached the charts a couple of times. This particular song, "Groove Me," peaked at number 6. And in fact, his career was so off again, on again, that he spent much of his life working in the post office, not on the road. That being said, the grooves from King Floyd apparently are highly prized in the hip hop and rap community, to the point where a lot of his material has been sampled. I think most famously by the Wu-Tang Clan, but many other people have sampled King Floyd material. So it's interesting. I think I think King fits under the heading of a kind of one-hit wonder. Not to diminish him, but I think that it's, to some degree sort of fits him. But it also, I think, suggests just how much talent there was in places like New Orleans, that people who were relatively obscure could, latch onto something, DJs could hear it and then push that song into the national limelight. I don't think that happens much anymore, but in the early 70s, it was still possible to be popular in a kind of particular part of the country, and then over the span of weeks have that song then make it to the national charts. And this is, to some degree, I think, King Floyd's story. He died in 2006, but many people really fondly remember him and his career with Groove Me. Are you familiar with the song at all?
I don't remember this song. If I heard it, I probably would know it, but it doesn't ring a bell.
Yeah, it vaguely rang a bell with me, but one of those songs that went up and down the charts, I think, relatively quickly. Okay, continuing on though, at number 8, there is the supergroup, maybe minus a member. The supergroup would be the Supremes, and the song at number 8 is "Stoned Love." So the Supremes.
Stoned Love.
Yeah.
Seems like a strange name. It was originally written Stone Love. Written and sang as Stone Love, as sometimes happens in production and distribution and so on. An error was made, so out of Stone Love becomes Love. So this is how this.
Yeah, that's amazing.
As you said, by the Supremes. Diana Ross. Diana Ross had left the year before,
Right.
and was replaced by Gene Farrell, a fantastic vocalist, a wonderful singer. But Mary William and Cindy Birdsong were still in the group. Cindy Birdsong had replaced the original Florence Ballard in 1967.
Yeah, that's right.
Had been a Supreme through much of their successful reign, and they did reign. They reigned supreme at Motown. They were one of the huge Motown hits. Of course, Motown was churning out hits and churning out superstars at an incredible rate from the mid 60s on. But the Supremes was one of them. And strangely enough, the Supremes were very, very hard group to get placed. Their first few songs didn't do anything. There's just no response to the Supremes at all until Come See About Me. And all of a sudden, things just opened up. And as we talk about elsewhere, they became a staple on the Ed Sullivan Show, and the Ed Sullivan Show, of course, is just a launching pad.
That's right.
But okay, at this point, Diana Ross is working on her solo career, and the Supremes are trying to continue. As I said, a very talented singer. This actually peaked at number 7. It was the Supremes' last top 10 hit.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's right. Yeah.
And the last one of the last 2 hits that they had at all. So things were winding down for them. It was their last number 1 R&B hit. But okay, they did have this, and it's still incredibly popular in places like Britain and so on. Not sure how many people, apart from Dyed in the Wool Supremes fans, know Stoned Love Today. The writer was Kenny Thomas. He was a Detroit teenager, and he had sent some of his songs to a local radio talent show. And of course, Frank Wilson, a producer at Motown, was listening in because they were always looking for new talent, especially.
Yeah.
That's kind of what Motown was about. Caught his ear, and so he went to visit Kenny Thomas, and Kenny Thomas played a number of his songs for him on a guitar with 2 strings. And then Frank Wilson came back and had Mary Wilson in tow, and Kenny Thomas was just thrilled. But yeah, so they went ahead and they recorded that. The Supremes recorded the vocals in New York City. The music was recorded at Motown Studio B in Detroit with the Funk Brothers and like 30 other session players. But
Wow.
Music and the vocals were recorded separately. Motown Studio B, they had to go there because Hitsville, USA was just getting too small to accommodate all the recording that was going on. And this was like the year before they moved to LA. Motown moved to LA. So Stone Love it's kind of this flower child vision of how love can change the world, and that's what and so thematically it's kind of in a trope that we saw with What the World Needs Now.
Jackie Shannon, the Shannon,
David Bacharach number, and Crystal Blue Persuasion. What the World Needs Now was 65. Crystal Blue Persuasion from Tommy James and the Shondells, 68. Everyday People by
Sly and the Family Stone.
Sly and the Family Stone. And then Get Together by Youngbloods. It's all the same sort of idea.
It is,
Well, all you need is love. You know, it's
Very
all
much,
the
yeah.
love can change the world. It's a force for good. We need more of it. People, let's come together and let's get the loving vibes going.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple things about
Exactly.
Stem. Yeah, that's very much a song of its time. I think it also fits into that sort of psychedelic soul category, which also was sort of floating around at this point. Like you said, I think it's a song that is.
Whitfield kind of brought that to Motown.
That's right. I think this is a song that is, like you say, really beloved by Supreme's fanatics, but largely has disappeared. I think in part because it doesn't have the Diana Ross presence. I mean, one even how many people bought this record and listened to this record, not even realizing that Diana Ross was no longer in the Supremes. There is something that Diana Ross brought to the Supremes that was, electric. And when she left, the group was lesser. It just simply was. And like you say, this is really sort of at the tail end, near the tail end of their career. And frankly, just when Diana Ross's career is just skyrocketing. I mean, Diana Ross will become a sort of central figure of the 1970s, both recording and in acting. It's just, I mean, she was everywhere. So in a weird sort of way, as the Supremes were winding down, Diana Ross was, as a solo act, was just getting started.
I think The Lady Sings the Blues.
Yes.
Well, actually, the first Motown movie.
Okay. Yeah.
Berry Gordy got into movie production with that. With his, I think she was his wife at the time.
Okay, that sounds right. Yeah. It was very much a Diana Ross vehicle. It was like the star vehicle.
Yes. Absolutely, yeah, and you're right.
Soundtrack, the whole deal. This was, yeah.
The Supremes was basically a launching pad for her divaship, and
for her divaship. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. It's it's interesting. There's a long history of people using groups, and then a person being in a group, and then exiting the group, and sort of launching into kind of even a larger fame and all this kind of thing. And Diana Ross is really at the, right at the top of that list for sure. And
at least as many people who thought they were going to do that,
yes,
who just went off the cliff after they left the group.
Well,
that goes in both directions.
Yeah, boy, you got that right. There's no question about that. We're going to come across some of those people here in upcoming episodes for sure. I just want, as we just get to the top 10, there's one other song in the top 10 we want to mention here real quickly, and that's Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, Tears of the Clown, which is it's a fantastic song. I think it's a song that in many ways defines the group, and is a song that is one of those tunes that I think will last. There's something about it it's an amazing song, just amazing.
Yeah, really.
I want to show you something, but we're going to cherry pick for a couple other songs here in the top 100. But Jay, I'm interested in your reaction to the TV guide. So if it's mid-January 1971, and you go to your mailbox and you pull out this, I'm just curious your reaction to TV guide here.
Oh, there's the original Man in Black.
For sure, absolutely.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And was this about his variety show?
It was, yes. The Johnny Cash show. This was right at.
I remember watching that as a kid, living in Memphis.
Oh, of all places, yes.
And each show would start with his back turned to the camera, and then he'd spin around and say, "Hello, I'm Johnny Cash." And then start playing something.
Oh yeah, I'm in the tank for Johnny Cash. The guy, I thought he was so awesome. I think that show in particular was so groundbreaking. It brought so many people to an American audience that they had not. I mean, he quite famously, brought people like Dylan and Joni Mitchell, just a whole host of people that were either controversial or who just hadn't had a big break. And he was, there's something sort of fearless about Johnny Cash that is.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Just so admirable.
Just nothing but love for Johnny Cash. He was, I think, really a great man. And you got to love a leftist in Nashville. There are not a lot of them, but the ones that are there are pretty incredible people.
Yeah, Cash is sneaky. He's just really sneaky. His politics and whatnot are just really quite astounding. I've made an error, and so we're going to have to backtrack just slightly because we did skip one from the top song from the top 10 that I did want to talk about briefly, and that's Barbra Streisand's version.
Barbra Streisand
version of Laura Nero's Stoney End, with a Streisand solo number that was really one of her more rollicking numbers. Streisand famously, of course, was a person who sang standards and who sang ballads, but not a lot of Streisand songs really had a kind of zip to them, but this clearly did. And so I guess if you're going to talk about Stoney End, you have to briefly mention Laura Nero, who was a talented singer or songwriter, but somebody who was very idiosyncratic and famously painfully shy. And so her public performances were oftentimes they were oftentimes disasters, most famously at Monterey, where everybody killed at Monterey, except for Laura Nero, who it was a disaster. Laura Nero.
Well, I think Clive Davis, we've already talked about him. I think he actually was the executive to sign Laura, but he was at Monterey and was just being blown away by all these acts and just ignored her completely. He didn't even remember had seen her. So yeah, it was unfortunate.
It was unfortunate. There's a kind of black cloud that hangs over Laura Nero's head a little bit, a kind of an unlucky individual. But that being said, she was befriended by a number of people in the business, most famously, of course, David Geffen, who worked very hard to get Laura Nero a record deal. He also most famously took a lot of her publishing. In fact, it was Laura Nero's publishing that helped to basically build David Geffen his first fortune, which he used to buy record companies and sort of launch himself as a record mogul. But to be fair to Geffen, I think that he deeply cared for Laura Nero, and I don't think that he robbed her by any sense. But it's no question that he benefited from that relationship. It was called Tuna Fish Music, named after Laura Nero's favorite food. That's very Laura Nero. Laura Nero also was befriended by Todd Rundgren, who we'll talk about in a bit. Rundgren was just over the moon and went to Laura Nero's apartment, knocked on it, and they just visited for hours, and he produced her last couple of albums. The Streisand number, though, is, well, again, like I said, it really moves. It peaks at number 6. Streisand is, by most accounts, the best-selling female artist of all time. I mean, there's some debate about, units, but I mean, she's certainly in that conversation. She's a person that has really, in many ways, kind of recording royalty, and she has a place in the cultural pantheon that certainly, she's more than just a recording artist, and she's long been more than just a recording artist. She's obviously had a lot of famous film roles and the like, but there's a kind of, I don't want to overstate this, but there's a kind of aura that surrounds Barbra Streisand that doesn't surround many people in the United States these days.
Oh, she's one of the great divas, and you're talking company like Aretha Franklin, recently Celine Dion, people like that who just well, she's got an amazing vocal talent, and she's an incredible actress. She's got comic chops that are just out of this world.
She does, and she does have comic chops. And during the 70s, she made a couple of movies that were quite amusing, including What's Up, Doc?
What's Up, Doc? Yeah.
She was paired with
Ryan O'Neal.
Yeah. So we have the Stoney End at number 9. We don't want to overlook that Barbra Streisand hit. Let's just cherry pick from a couple of other songs here from the songs that were playing in mid-January. At number 18, you have Stephen Stills with Love the One You're With.
Right. That actually peaked at number 14, but it's from his first solo album, Stephen Stills.
Mm-hmm.
And this was his first solo work after being with Buffalo Springfield, Crosby, Stills and Nash, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. This was his first solo outing. But even then, David Crosby and Graham Nash were singing background on this song. Recorded in November 1970. Rita Coolidge and John Sebastian were also background singers for this song. This song was inspired by, well, I guess you could say it just ripped off a Billy Preston motto. Anybody who knew Billy Preston recognized immediately where the chorus for the song came from. Billy Preston apparently was known to say this on numerous occasions. If you can't be with the one you love,
well,
love the one you're with.
That is very interesting coming from Billy Preston, who was famously very conflicted about his own sexuality. And that's very interesting. Yeah, okay. So everybody.
So
so this that's a Billy Preston.
He heard that and thought, oh well, I could make a song out of that. So he said, do you mind me writing a song with that? And Billy Preston said, oh, go ahead. So that's what he did.
That's a great story.
And this was Stephen Stills was just kind of jack of all trades on this song. He played guitar, the organ, steel drum, percussion. The only instruments that he did not play were bass. Fuzzy Samuels played bass on this, okay. And the congas were played by Jeff Whitaker, but he played all the other instruments.
Stephen Stills is a magnificent musician, And I think the people within CSN&Y have long acknowledged that he's amazing. He's amazing. If not the most overlooked member of that group, he is maybe the most musical.
Well, at this point, he was being represented by David Gibb. And
it's a shark.
David Gibb had placed him with Atlantic Records. And so he made his first solo album for Atlantic Records. Okay. Talk about a small world.
For sure.
Again and again.
If you're going to be on a label, you definitely want to be on Atlantic. It's a couple things there about Stephen Stills. One is that, when you talk about Stephen Stills, for better or worse, you always end up talking about Neil Young. Stephen Stills met Neil Young when both a very young man. He met him when they were gigging in central Canada. They met and they immediately set up kindled a kind of friendship that then they reconnected in California. I think famously Neil Young has always had a kind of bond with Stephen Stills that he never had with Graham Nash, and he certainly never had with David Crosby. I think few people have been left at the altar by Neil Young. Stills has, over and over and over again. But yet they have a kind of connection that Neil Young described as almost a kind of brotherhood, and so they are, they're deeply
right.
connected.
But it's also only possible because Stephen Stills apparently has an infinite capacity for forgiveness.
I think that's fair. No, I think that's an infinite capacity. Yeah, Stephen Stills is a person who, famously had a relationship with Judy Collins, which then yielded the song "Sweet Judy Blue Eyes." Stephen Stills has played on so many different albums and so many different styles. He's really a remarkable guitarist, but it always seems that, from my perspective, he always seemed like kind of the least, visible member of that either trio or quartet. There's just something about him that he was a little bit in the background. but a magnificent talent, a magnificent talent. Okay, so at number 18 we have Love the One You're With Stephen Stills. At 20 we have those crazy kids from England. We have a rare appearance on the singles chart from Led Zeppelin. At number 20 is Immigrant Song, which is a tune from the tune. Led Zeppelin didn't have tunes. The song Led Zeppelin from Led Zeppelin 3. Led Zeppelin is the quintessential sort of albums act, and Led Zeppelin,
absolutely,
again, quite famous, actually just almost rejected the notion of releasing singles, but somehow Immigrant Song was released.
But still, if FM radio had never arisen, then Led Zeppelin, we may never have heard Led Zeppelin without FM radio.
I think that's absolutely right. And so what's interesting about this particular song is it's short. It was one of the few Led Zeppelin songs that's short. It's only a little over a couple minutes long. It is also just immediately powerful, and anybody who's heard Immigrant Song immediately does the kind of Robert Plant imitation of the opening, which is just spine chilling. It's incredible. And it is it's a song that's sort of drenched in Norse mythology, Valhalla, and all this kind of stuff. It actually, in part, describes a gig they had in Iceland. And a gig that was kind of impromptu, but went extremely, extremely well. And then Page and Plant quickly wrote this song. Led Zeppelin 3 of the Zeppelin albums is probably my second favorite. My first favorite is the fourth album, Sozo album. But the Led Zeppelin 3 album is interesting in that it has a lot of rock numbers. It also has a lot of acoustic numbers, a nice balance there. And it has precious few blues numbers. So from my perspective, I know everybody has a different take on Led Zeppelin. My perspective on Led Zeppelin is that they were best when they were acoustic or when they were rocking. I think particularly when they were acoustic. I love Hippie Zepp. And my least favorite Zeppelin are the blues drenched numbers, which I think that's how and why these guys got together, but that's the stuff that I don't enjoy very much at all.
Well, yeah, if you talk about almost any rock group coming out of England in the 60s, they all perceived themselves as blues bands originally. I mean, that's how they self-identified, at least at the origin of every one of these.
Yes, absolutely.
So fortunately, none of them got stuck there. Well, no, I say right. Fortunately, because I have a limited appreciation for blues. I think there's some blues out there that's just absolutely fantastic, but yeah, my enthusiasm peters out fairly quickly.
Well, so I share that perspective, and so we have Led Zeppelin at number 20 with oh man, the incredible Immigrant Song. At 21, we have Van Morrison with Domino, and Van Morrison is a compelling artist, and Domino is one of his big hits, I think.
Well, Van Morrison is someone that I apparently underappreciate, because everyone, every critic that I've ever read just thinks he is the shit. So I will readily admit I may not really understand him as well as I should, but Domino is one of the songs of his that's just incredibly easy to listen to. It's fun, and this is from his band and the Street Choir album, his fourth studio album, and it's his tribute to New Orleans artist Fats Domino.
Fats Domino, yeah.
Was released in November 1970. It had been recorded, or at least this version of it had been recorded in the spring of that year. The first time that he was in the studio with this song was in '68. and he kept putting off the publication, the release. And probably the main reason was because of a singles clause in a contract that he had with his music publisher, Web 4,
Okay.
which stated that they would get half of the copyright of any song that he published and released between September 68 and September 69.
Oh.
So he just thought, maybe I'll release my singles sometime in a different period.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
That seems like a huge loophole to me. I don't know who wrote the contract.
I don't either, yeah.
Generally, music industry lawyers are better than that.
A little more savvy, yeah.
It's screwing artists and getting everything for their people.
Right.
But anyway, so there's that. And but Warner Brothers said, okay, we need to have a single. We need to hear something that we can get on a radio. So he produced this, published it, and it was his biggest hit. His highest charting single peaked at number 9.
Yeah.
So it was top 10. I think his only other top 10 song was Brown Eyed Girl.
Brown Eyed Girl.
Brown Eyed Girl peaked at 10.
Yeah, there we go.
So the B-side of this is Sweet Janny. And Sweet, I'm assuming, refers to his wife, Janet Planet. Janet Planet was his nickname for Janet Rigsby. They married, settled down in Woodstock, New York. She said they moved to Woodstock because Van Morrison wanted to meet Bob Dylan and thought that they would form a great artistic friendship and so on. But they just kept driving past his place, and Van Morrison would look at it yearningly, and they'd keep driving. So it never happened. While they lived in Woodstock, they never met Bob Dylan. But more and more hippie people moved there because they wanted to meet Van Morrison. They wanted to meet Bob Dylan. And Van Morrison couldn't stand hippies. So they had to move away from Woodstock. But anyway, Janet Planet was an ethereal being. She was just absolutely lovely. And Brown Eyed Girl and just a number of his songs were written for her. She was his muse in the early part of his career.
You know, a couple things about that. One is that it's interesting that Van Morrison thought he could establish a artistic partnership with anyone, because he's famously the most grumpy guy in music. He's just dyspeptic beyond imagination. He was just, hard to get along with. But it is a case that people went to Woodstock to talk to Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan tells a story of, like, answers the door, and some guys asking about organic farming and stuff like that. I mean, it just happened all the time. This Woodstock thing was just drew people from all over. It is also the case, you're right, that there is a kind of reverence that surrounds Van Morrison and his early work that is, from critics, it's just kind of a little bit surprising. His Astral Weeks, for example, is considered like one of the great albums in the history of recorded music, and all of that. There's way more attention from critics for Van Morrison than there ever was, I think, really from the public and the public's reception.
Well, you saw his this was his biggest hit, and it peaked at number 9. He never had a number 1 hit. He just barely squeaked into the top 10 a couple times.
No, I think a little Van Morrison goes a long way for me, I think, for the most part, and I think that's probably true for most people. But there's few people who would get. I mean, he's the critics' darling. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, when you look at Rolling Stone's, top albums and all this kind of thing, a bunch of his LPs are at the in the upper echelons, and I don't know.
Well, and he has a very, very loyal following. I mean, Van Morrison fans
Yeah.
are huge Van Morrison fans.
Yeah,
So-
that's there's no question about that. As does the last person I wanted to say something about today, and that's Todd Rundgren, who at number 22 in mid-January has the song called has a hit called "We Gotta Get You a Woman." It came under the moniker of Runt, which was a kind of three-piece that Rundgren was in at the time, but this is largely considered a kind of Rundgren solo effort. And Rundgren is one of those people, also one of those people that is a kind of critic's darling, that he has a kind of intense fan following, but it's a relatively small fan following. And it's also the case, well, I think like Van Morrison, that Rundgren had only sort of limited success on the singles chart. One big difference between Van Morrison and Todd Rundgren is that Todd Rundgren is a pretty affable guy, and Van Morrison famously isn't. But Todd Rundgren is one of those guys that you mentioned, jack of all trades earlier with Stephen Stills, and Rundgren fits into that category as well. He plays many instruments, and he's been famously very active in the production realm. Not only does Rundgren produce his own stuff and has long produced his own stuff, but he's always been a kind of go-to producer for people. Mentioned Laura Nero a second ago, but he produced the album Stage Fright from the band. He produced Straight Up from Badfinger. He produced the New York Dolls' first album. He produced Grand Funk Railroad's We're an American Band, and got them to #1, by the way. He produced War Babies for Hall & Oates. He produced Patti Smith's Wave. He produced XTC's, which is...
I love that album.
Oh, Wave?
Oh, I love Wave.
Yeah.
That's my favorite Patti Smith album, actually.
Yeah. It's absolutely, and it has the Rundgren touch. And speaking of the Rundgren touch, then there's a little album called Bat Out of Hell from Meatloaf, Jim Steinman's Over the Top. That is, in its own way, magnificent. Bat Out, there's really nothing like Bat Out of Hell. But
it's the only Meatloaf album that anyone needs.
Oh, absolutely. But this is the same. This guy produced Bat Out of Hell and music from Laura Nero. I mean, how the hell is that even possible? But Rundgren is, he has those. I mean, he's really an amazing producer. He's
and I think his biggest fans are other musicians.
I think that's it.
As far as I can tell.
No, I think
they just seem to really all hold him in great admiration.
I think that's absolutely right. And so Rundgren is still out there swinging for the fences. He's still quite active. The other thing about Rundgren I would have mentioned in passing is that he's always been an innovator. He's always been quick to embrace technology, and he's really been at the forefront of a variety of sort of technologies in music. And this dates way back into the 70s. And so We Gotta Get You a Woman is a hit, a kind of modest hit for Todd Rundgren, but he's a person worth noting for sure. And so there we have it, the big hits from mid-January 1971, and we will keep pushing ahead with 1971 in future episodes. So Dave, you got a couple of words in closing.
Sure. If you enjoyed this episode of 50 years ago this month, you can subscribe right here. There are some another episode that you can check out right here, and our playlist. So definitely check that out if you haven't yet. But the playlist can also be linked. It's also linked down below, so you can check it out there.
Absolutely.
Okay. We'll see you next month.
Each month a reading list. So thanks everybody, and we'll talk to you. We'll talk to you next month. All bye.
Bye-bye.